Welcome back. Journalist and author Laura Dodsworth is in the studio. Welcome, Laura. We've got a busy day going on, the COVID inquiry, so we'll have to squeeze you into a slightly shorter time slot. But because of the COVID inquiry, it gives me the chance to ask you what you think about the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, saying that the big mistake we made last time was we didn't lock down early enough, and next time we're going to lock down much more extensively and take away much more of our freedoms. What planet is this guy on?
I have found his evidence so far today absolutely breathtaking in its audacity.
And awfulness.
Now, I knew that he would be well prepared, slick, smooth, oily, one might say, but I wasn't prepared for just how arrogant he would be and the chutzpah of the things he's saying. Here's a couple of choice quotes. I mean, a huge error in the doctrine that the UK and the whole of the Western world had was our existing pandemic plans. We had a flawed doctrine. We must learn the right lessons to stop a pandemic in its tracks much earlier, and the failure went back years and years. I tell you what he's doing. He is throwing the existing pandemic plans and planners that we had under the bus. Now, for my book State of Fear, I interviewed some of the key figures involved in writing pandemic plans, and our existing pandemic plans were based on science. They were ethical, they were proportionate, they were a whole society response. What he's doing is trying to bury the enormous disaster that was lockdown, and it will not get a fair hearing in this inquiry, by calling all of our existing plans the error, and they weren't. And by the way, this man who says that we should have locked down earlier and harder, let's not forget he was having an extramarital affair. So the risk that he thinks was so great that schools had to be shut, society should lock down earlier for, wasn't enough to stop him purportedly risking the lives of two households through having an extramarital affair. This is all bunkum, and it is audacious bunkum.
And can I just point out that most of us believe and I think we're justified to believe this, the lockdowns didn't work. Once you have I keep saying, once you have one lockdown and then you come out of the lockdown and a month later go, oh, blimey, better lock down again, it means the first one didn't work, and nor did the second, and nor did the third.
Well, you're in good company, because Professor Sunetra Gupta, one of the world's leading epidemiologists, has an article in the Telegraph today, and she says, I mean, she's quite optimistic and I'd say hopeful in her hypothesis. She's saying that because we're beginning to discuss the effects of lockdown harms on children, that we're entering into a narrative collapse phase of the lockdowns. I don't see it yet. I hope she's right. What she says is if you concede that you should not shut down schools, you might as well say you should not lock down, because there was never any empirical or theoretical credible reason why you would use social distancing measures. You have to remember, this was the brand new mistake. This was the new doctrine, and this went against decades of planning.
We need to get at least one more topic in, but what single word statement to you?
Sweden will do. And of course, you've got to remember that in the questions from Lady Hallett, Boris Johnson, she asked why we weren't comparing ourselves more to New Zealand, for instance, and didn't mention Sweden, which has one of the world's lowest excess deaths.
And did not lock down and did much better than us.
Didn't shut down schools. The economy hasn't suffered. Did make some mistakes, for example, with care homes, but has one of the lowest excess mortalities in the world.
Exactly. Now, very quick, let's move on. There's a story on the front page of the Times today. Again, it's one of these, a lot of stories around that are beggaring my belief. The government, Mel Stride, is proposing that they spend £2,000 per person to provide them with life coaches, because they are suffering from social media-driven anxiety and the physical strain of working from home. £2,000 per person.
It's a crackpot scheme, and the problem is that what we're doing is throwing lots of money at people who don't want to work. I'm a freelancer. Nobody pays me not to work. It's amazing how much more productive
motivational
this makes you. I can tell you.
I know the syndromes,
right?
Laura,
You know, any day off is a day you're not earning money. Now, we do seem to have quite a uniquely bad problem with the long-term sick in this country. I'm not I'm not an expert on all of the complex data behind this, but I think we need to look at why the UK and not the rest of the world. We do have very generous benefit system. The NHS is creaking under the seams. People aren't getting assistance with all kinds of health problems, physical, mental health.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've really had a proper return to work at all since COVID. I'm sure this is going to be very multifactorial, but the idea that what these people need is an expensive life coach seems to be, I'm going to use the word again today,
Yeah,
bunker.
a government-funded life coach. By the way...
No, sorry, Kevin, not government-funded, taxpayer-funded, us. Those of us working and paying for it, not the government. It's always our money.
Yeah, of course. And of course, if working from home is fueling anxiety, here's an idea. Let's ban working from home. Hey, it's not doing anyone any good. It's going to wreck the country. It's going to ruin a load of companies. And clearly, it's making people who do work from home, WFH people, full of anxiety. So what a mess. Just before you go, there's a story I know you want to talk about. I've been talking about this a lot. Parents need to know what schools are teaching their kids about sex education, says Tory MP Miriam Cates. She's got a point, hasn't she?
She has. I mean, thank goodness we've got a sensible MP somewhere in the House of Commons. Miriam Cates is putting forward a private member's bill saying that instead of schools having guidance that they must share sex education materials with pupils, that it should be legally mandated. This seems to be such common sense. It's unbelievable because although schools and parents should be developing shared values together, there have been so many examples this year where we've found out that what schools are teaching children in these strange, hallowed, secretive sex and relationship education lessons is astonishing. You know, multiple genders, very graphic sexual descriptions.
Yeah, multiple genders as fact. As
fact, not ideology. And I wouldn't even be able to discuss the things they're learning in their sex education with you. If you remember, it's back in March, the Isle of Man paused all SRE lessons because a child was ejected from a lesson
by a drag queen
for saying that there weren't over 70 genders, and they learnt about some extremely explicit sex acts which I'd say most parents would think aren't appropriate for primary school age children. You know, we've been labouring under this old-fashioned delusion that kids go to school to learn the 3 R's, and they're not. They're learning the 70 genders and the Kama Sutra.
Well, we learnt a couple of weeks ago, apologies for bringing up sort of unsavoury topics, but that 9-year-olds in British schools were being taught about anal sex, and kids slightly older than that were being sent home and their homework was to masturbate. I mean,
You've just gone where I thought we weren't allowed to go on there.
Well, you're not supposed to, but you've got to tell the truth. That's what's happening. How is that happening in our schools? Why do they want to rob children of their innocence?
It's also not really the state or the school's responsibility. They're putting themselves directly between the parents who know what's best for their child and understands what's appropriate for the child's development and the child. They've got no business being there. And it is very much a worry they're teaching these things as facts. You know, even in religious education lessons, they learn about different faiths of the world, and they learn that they're faith-based, they're belief-based. They're not fact. And that's not how they're teaching gender.
And what I think is at the root of all of this is you've got a kind of left-wing educational system that distrusts parents and thinks they're Neanderthals and they're not woke enough and they're not modern enough in their outlook. And they believe the state should be in charge of bringing up children and not parents. And I believe that's very wrong.
It is very wrong. And if you look at, say, STD incidences in this country, they're going up massively. They've gone up about a quarter in the last year. Now, if sex education lessons were doing their job, at least everybody would be having safe sex, and they don't seem to be. Yeah. They should be teaching about positive, healthy relationships, loving relationships, reproduction, basic biological facts, and how to have sex safely.
Well, Laura, that was all too short, but I think we squeezed a lot in, and that was really good.
We certainly did.
Thank you very, very much. Laura Dodsworth there, journalist and author.